Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound. That's an unconfirmed report.
Parkland Hospital has been placed on high alert. Doctors rush through crowded corridors. Nurses whisper about a patient they cannot name aloud. A stretcher rolls past, surrounded by Secret Service agents. Onlookers gasp as they recognize the face. The President of the United States has been shot. The voice crackles over the radio. "This is an unconfirmed report. The President was struck in the head." Reporters scramble for details, their voices trembling as they relay the fragments of chaos to the world. The nation waits, suspended between disbelief and dread. At the hospital's entrance, Jackie Kennedy walks beside the stretcher, her pink suit stained with blood, her face pale but determined. She is not injured, but her husband lies motionless. Every second matters. Every eye is fixed on Parkland. It is November 22nd, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. A sunny afternoon turns into a storm of confusion. Motorcades are supposed to symbolize celebration and unity, not carnage. Yet, in a matter of seconds, gunfire has shattered the sense of safety Americans held on to. The President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, has been brutally attacked in broad daylight. The airwaves erupt. Broadcasters speak with urgency, voices faltering under the weight of history. Some cling to the faint hope that Kennedy might survive, while others begin to grasp the magnitude of what has just happened. Across the country, millions of Americans sit frozen in front of their televisions, their radios, their telephones, waiting for confirmation. What began as whispers quickly becomes a roar. Words like assassination spread across headlines. Dallas is no longer just a city. It has become the stage for a national tragedy. In the minutes that follow, the world realizes the president has been fatally wounded. The news brings silence to classrooms, workplaces, and homes. The unthinkable has happened. America has lost its leader, and the world has lost its sense of innocence. And so begins one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Who killed John F. Kennedy? Was it a lone gunman, or was there something more? The year was 1963, a time when America stood at a crossroads. John F. Kennedy represented a new generation of leadership. Young, charismatic, and ambitious, he carried the weight of a nation still finding its footing in the Cold War era. His speeches promised hope, his image symbolized vitality, and his presidency offered a sense of renewal that resonated with millions. Kennedy's vision was bold. He spoke of putting a man on the moon, of advancing civil rights, of facing down the Soviet Union without flinching. His optimism was magnetic, his presence commanding. To many Americans, he was not just a president, he was a symbol of progress, a leader who could guide the nation through turbulent times. But beneath the shining surface of Camelot, the world was anything but stable. The Cold War cast its shadow over every political decision. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 had brought humanity to the edge of nuclear destruction. Tensions between Washington and Moscow simmered, leaving Americans uneasy about the future. Meanwhile, civil rights battles raged across the South, testing the country's moral fabric. Kennedy was admired by some, despised by others, and watched by all. Dallas, Texas, in particular, was not the friendliest ground for Kennedy. The city had become a hotbed of political hostility. Billboards and newspaper ads attacked his policies. Leaflets accusing him of betraying the Constitution circulated in the streets. The atmosphere was charged with anger and suspicion. For weeks, leading up to his visit, there had been whispers of possible trouble. November 22nd began like any other day in Dallas. Crowds lined the streets to catch a glimpse of the presidential motorcade. Children waved flags, parents held cameras, and supporters cheered as Kennedy's open-top limousine made its way through the city. The motorcade route was public knowledge, printed in newspapers and studied by onlookers who hoped to see the president up close. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a chance for Kennedy to reconnect with voters in Texas and strengthen political alliances before the 1964 election. Instead, it became a nightmare etched into history. At 12:30 p.m., as the motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, shots rang out. The president slumped forward, clutching his throat, before collapsing into Jackie's arms. The motorcade accelerated toward Parkland Hospital, but hope was slipping away. In that moment, everything changed. The optimism of a generation was silenced. A young president's life was cut short, leaving behind unfinished dreams and unanswered questions. The United States was plunged into grief, but also into suspicion. How could the most powerful man in the world be struck down so easily in front of thousands of witnesses with cameras rolling? The Warren Commission would later attempt to answer these questions. But the seeds of doubt were already planted. Too many details seemed strange. Too many witnesses described things that did not fit the official narrative. The idea of a lone gunman seemed almost too simple for such a seismic event. From that day forward, the Kennedy assassination became more than just a tragedy. It became a puzzle. A story told and retold, investigated and reinvestigated, debated endlessly across generations. To this day, more than 60 years later, it remains one of the most studied, contested, and haunting events in modern history. For many Americans, the assassination of John F. Kennedy is remembered through television clips, newspaper headlines, and classroom announcements. But for filmmaker Rob Reiner, the moment has never been just history. It has been a lifelong personal memory, etched into his consciousness since the day it happened. Reiner, known worldwide for directing films like A Few Good Men and When Harry Met Sally, was just a teenager in high school when the news broke. He recalls sitting in class when a student leaned forward and whispered something into the teacher's ear. Moments later, the teacher's voice cracked as she announced that the president had been shot in Dallas. School was dismissed early, and like millions of others, Reiner rushed home, glued to the television screen for days that followed. The images seared themselves into his mind. Jackie Kennedy in her blood-stained pink suit, Lyndon Johnson taking the oath of office aboard Air Force One, and perhaps most shocking of all, the live broadcast of Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin, being gunned down by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. These weren't just headlines. They were surreal moments playing out in real time before a stunned nation. For Reiner, the assassination was more than a political crisis. It was the day innocence seemed to vanish from American life. And for decades, he carried with him the nagging questions that so many others shared. Was the official story, the lone gunman theory, really the truth? Or had a deeper, darker conspiracy unfolded in Dallas that day? That question became the foundation of his investigative journey. Over the years, Reiner found himself drawn back, again and again, to Dealey Plaza, the small patch of land in downtown Dallas where history had turned bloody. He stood on the grassy knoll, walked the path of the motorcade, and looked up at the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, trying to imagine how one man could have carried out such an act under such circumstances. He spoke with forensic experts, reviewed eyewitness testimonies, and studied documents that had been kept classified for decades. The deeper he went, the less convinced he became that the Warren Commission's version of events told the full story. This obsession eventually led him to create a 10-part podcast series titled Who Killed JFK, co-hosted with journalist Soledad O'Brien. Together, they sifted through decades of evidence, interviews, and newly released files with the goal of presenting the most comprehensive look yet at the assassination. Unlike many previous investigations, Reiner's approach was not just historical, it was deeply personal. He was not a detached researcher examining old case files. He was a man haunted by a moment he had lived through, determined to make sense of it. The podcast promised to reveal explosive finds. The JFK assassination has always been more than an event. It's a wound that never healed. And for Reiner, the search for truth wasn't just investigative, it was personal therapy. a way of wrestling with a mystery that had haunted him since adolescence. The official explanation for Kennedy's assassination was delivered less than a year later in the form of the Warren Commission report. According to this account, the case was straightforward. A single man, Lee Harvey Oswald, acted alone. From a sixth-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository, he fired 3 shots at the presidential motorcade. One bullet missed. Another struck both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. The final shot delivered the fatal wound to Kennedy's head. On paper, it sounded simple, but almost immediately, doubts began to spread. The idea that one man with a cheap rifle could pull off such a feat, 3 shots in under 6 seconds, hitting a moving target from over 250 feet away, struck many as implausible. Even experienced marksmen questioned whether the shots could be made under those conditions. And then there was the infamous magic bullet theory, the lone gunman theory. The Warren Commission argued that the second bullet Oswald fired passed through Kennedy's neck, exited, and then struck Governor Connally, causing multiple wounds. To critics, this single bullet theory seemed like something out of fiction. How could one bullet inflict 7 wounds on 2 men, change directions multiple times, and still be found largely intact on a hospital stretcher? Skeptics dubbed it the magic bullet, a phrase that still lingers in public debate today. Supporters of the Warren Commission, however, argue that the theory is plausible when considering the seating positions of Kennedy and Connally. To them, the bullet's path, while unusual, is not impossible. Yet the imagery of a magic bullet only fueled conspiracy theories, turning the assassination into a riddle that Americans have tried to solve ever since. Alternative suspects and motives. Almost as soon as the Warren report was published, critics proposed other possibilities. Some pointed to the Soviet Union, noting Oswald's time spent in Russia and his marriage to a Soviet woman. Others suggested Cuba, given Oswald's pro-Castro activism and the CIA's secret efforts to overthrow Fidel Castro. Still others looked closer to home, suspecting the CIA itself or even the Mafia. The Mafia theory gained traction because of the Kennedy administration's aggressive crackdown on organized crime. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother, had made powerful enemies in the mob world. Figures like Carlos Marcello in New Orleans and Sam Giancana in Chicago had both motive and resources. Could the assassination have been a brutal message to the Kennedys? Then there was the CIA theory. Declassified documents over the years have revealed that the agency was involved in plots to assassinate foreign leaders, including Fidel Castro. Some speculate that rogue elements within the CIA, unhappy with Kennedy's policies, could have played a role in eliminating him. Witness accounts that raise questions. Eyewitnesses also added fuel to the fire. Several onlookers in Dealey Plaza reported hearing shots coming not just from the Texas School Book Depository, but also from the grassy knoll, a small rise to the front and right of the motorcade. In fact, more than half of the people surveyed immediately after the assassination believed shots came from that direction. If true, this would suggest a second shooter and, by extension, a conspiracy. Doctors at Parkland Hospital who treated Kennedy also made observations that contradicted the official report. Some described entrance wounds that suggested shots from the front, not from behind, as the Warren Commission concluded. These discrepancies only deepened public mistrust. The House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s, growing public pressure led to a new investigation. The House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, though it did not name specific suspects. This statement reignited debates and gave credibility to those who had long questioned the lone gunman theory. Newly released documents. In recent years, declassified government documents have continued to add layers to the mystery. Some suggest that Oswald had contact with intelligence operatives, both American and foreign, in the months leading up to the assassination. Others point to strange inconsistencies in FBI and CIA records about Oswald's activities. The picture that emerges is murky. On one hand, Oswald clearly had the means and opportunity. His fingerprints were found on the rifle. He worked in the building. He had expressed radical political views. But on the other hand, his background raises unsettling questions. Was he merely a troubled drifter who acted alone? Or was he, as some suggest, a pawn in a larger game orchestrated by forces far more powerful? The power of doubt, perhaps the reason. The JFK assassination continues to fascinate is that the official story, while neat and tidy, leaves too many loose ends. Every piece of evidence seems to have an asterisk attached. The rifle? Yes, it was Oswald's. But could he have used it so effectively? The bullet? Yes, it was found. But could it really have caused so much damage and remained intact? The witnesses? Yes, they were present, but their accounts contradict one another. The assassination sits at the intersection of fact and speculation, history and myth. It is a case where the simplest explanation, the lone gunman, feels unsatisfying, while the more complex theories offer intrigue but lack definitive proof. And so, more than 60 years later, the question remains open. Was it Oswald acting alone? Or was it something bigger? A conspiracy involving the CIA, the Mafia, Cuban exiles, or even foreign governments? No matter which theory one believes, the reality is the same. A young president was cut down in broad daylight, and the truth of that day continues to elude us. If the Warren Commission sought to close the case with clarity, the evidence left behind did the opposite. Each fragment of proof, each witness account, seemed to add not closure but complication. The assassination became less of a solved crime and more of a puzzle box, one where every answer produced a new set of questions. Eyewitness contradictions. Dozens of witnesses lined Dealey Plaza that day. Some were journalists, others bystanders, simply hoping to glimpse the president. Many swore they heard shots from different directions. While official reports pinned all 3 shots on the Texas school book depository, several witnesses insisted the sound came from the grassy knoll. Photographs even captured individuals standing there in the moments after the shooting, figures who were never identified. One man, remembered as holding an umbrella despite the clear skies, became infamous as the Umbrella Man. To conspiracy theorists, he wasn't just a passerby. He was a signal man, perhaps even part of the plot. The Zapruder film then came, the most famous piece of evidence of all, the Zapruder film. Captured by a local dressmaker, Abraham Zapruder, the 26-second home movie provided the most chilling visual record of the assassination. For years, it was sequestered away, studied, frame by frame, debated endlessly by experts. When Kennedy's head snaps violently backward after the fatal shot, many interpret this as evidence of a frontal shot, contradicting the official version of bullets fired from behind. Others argue it was the natural recoil of the body. To this day, the film remains one of the most scrutinized pieces of footage in American history. Medical testimony. The doctors at Parkland Hospital added another layer of complexity. Several reported entrance wounds in Kennedy's throat, suggesting a shot from the front. Yet the official autopsy conducted later at Bethesda Naval Hospital contradicted these accounts, describing wounds consistent with shots from behind. Even the handling of the president's body sparked controversy. Why was it rushed out of Dallas against Texas law requiring a local autopsy? Why were there inconsistencies between the Parkland doctor's notes and the Bethesda report? These questions continue to feed speculation. The pristine bullet, and then, of course, there is the bullet. The so-called magic bullet was recovered from a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, almost undamaged despite allegedly passing through 2 men and causing 7 wounds. Oswald's mysterious background, Lee Harvey. Oswald himself seemed to generate contradictions. A former Marine who defected to the Soviet Union, only to return to the United States without facing serious consequences, Oswald lived a life full of strange connections. He handed out pro-Castro pamphlets in New Orleans, but some witnesses claimed he also had ties to anti-Castro groups. Was he a true radical, or was he being manipulated by unseen forces? After his arrest, Oswald declared, "I'm just a patsy." 2 days later, before he could stand trial, he was murdered by Jack Ruby, live on national television. Ruby's actions silenced the only man who might have offered clarity, replacing answers with yet another layer of mystery. Classified files and withheld secrets. For decades, secrecy only deepened suspicion. Thousands of government files related to the assassination remained classified, fueling rumors that the truth was being hidden. Each time new documents were released, they provided tantalizing glimpses, references to intelligence operatives, suspicious surveillance of Oswald, and foreign connections but rarely full explanations. The act of withholding itself became evidence in the eyes of the public. If there was nothing to hide, critics asked, why keep the files locked away? The weight of inconsistencies, individually, each of these details might be explained away. Gunfire echoes in urban spaces. Medical reports differ under pressure. Witnesses misremember. But collectively, the inconsistencies form a pattern too large to ignore. The bullet, the film, the autopsy, the witnesses, the classified files, each strand pulls the narrative away from the simplicity of a lone gunman. The Kennedy assassination is, at its core, a story of evidence that refuses to align. Every time researchers attempt to stitch the facts into a neat conclusion, the threads unravel. Forensic experts, historians, and amateur investigators have spent lifetimes studying these fragments, only to find themselves circling back to the same haunting uncertainty. In this way, the assassination endures not only as a national tragedy, but as a riddle, one where the evidence does not merely document the crime, but perpetuates the mystery. 60 years have passed since that fateful afternoon in Dallas, and still the questions linger. The Zapruder film has been dissected frame by frame. Thousands of documents have been released, and countless investigations have tried to untangle the web. Yet the truth remains elusive. The official story, that one man, armed with a rifle, changed the course of history, remains the government's position. But for millions of Americans, that answer feels incomplete. The contradictions are too many, the coincidences too sharp, the evidence too unsettled. Did Lee Harvey Oswald truly act alone? Was he a fanatic seeking notoriety or a pawn manipulated by forces larger than himself? And what of Jack Ruby, the man who silenced Oswald forever? Was his act one of rage or part of a broader effort to ensure the truth never came to light? Every theory, whether it points to the CIA, the Mafia, Cuban exiles, or foreign governments, carries with it fragments of plausibility, yet none delivers absolute proof. This is the paradox of the Kennedy assassination. The more evidence emerges, the deeper the mystery seems to grow. Perhaps that is why the event endures. It is not just the death of a president, but the loss of certainty. A moment that shattered trust in government, in institutions, and even in the nature of truth itself. For many, the assassination marked the end of America's post-war innocence, ushering in an era of suspicion and disillusionment, and so the story continues to haunt us. Dealey Plaza remains a place of pilgrimage where visitors stand on the grassy knoll. Look up at the sixth-floor window and try to imagine the shots that changed the world. Books, films, and podcasts keep the debate alive, each one promising answers but delivering new questions. Maybe the truth is out there, buried in classified files or hidden in memories that will never be shared. Or maybe the truth is that we will never truly know. What happened in Dallas on November 22, 1963, remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern history. And perhaps that, more than any theory, is what keeps us returning to it. Because the unanswered question is sometimes more powerful than the answer itself.